Thank you, Lena, so much for being on the Tech or Tradition podcast. And I'm super excited to explore the cybersecurity piece from what you've seen in your career in terms of where we are today, and both exploring the individual aspect and corporate aspect and what people can really do to help have that extra added layer of insurance, or as you call it, the human firewall. And Lena, you've had quite the interesting career in terms of what you're doing now, in which you're the Executive Director Office of CISO, Optiv Canada, and you were previously with RCMP, with cybercrime. So I'd love to just hear it from you in terms of giving a synopsis of your background and hearing about your career.
Thank you. No, it's a pleasure to be here. You and I could probably sit and chat for hours, no matter where we are. So I retired from the RCMP just in May of 2025. But previous to that, I joined the RCMP in 1994. So I've been so lucky for some of the roles that I've had. So if you can imagine, I started off in frontline policing in a uniform, on the beat in British Columbia. I did a number of roles throughout there, whether it was in drug section, major crime. I worked on an island on my own for 2.5 years, ran a police boat. I've worked in intelligence, border, and then when I came to Ontario in 2008, I did everything from intelligence, drug section, national security, heavy emphasis on national security, investigative interviewing. I built and ran an investigative interviewing team. I was the field commander for the Air Marshal program out of Toronto. And then I spent my last few years in cybercrime, which I was so passionate about. And, you know, though I retired with just over 30 years, the opportunity to be able to stay in the space and really continue the work that I started there has been, I'm so privileged to be able to do that with Optiv. So in my current role, I do everything from executive advisory. I provide strategic advice support to organizations who are looking at, what does the big picture look like? How do you bring it all together? One of my favorite things is just being able to translate what that risk looks like to the business, but translating that business risk to the executive level, the board level,
Mhm.
helping CISOs and cybersecurity professionals explain what the risks are and why they're so important. And I mentor. That's also one of the things I do. I mentor at that level. So I really like it's like all the best parts of my old job all rolled into one. So that's my retirement. My husband calls it my retirement hobby.
Well, we're very grateful to have you and for your service and the breadth
Thank
of
you.
which you've been able to do, and really bringing that into Canada and other corporations now, as things are drastically changing in many cases. So cybersecurity, it's something that I had a bit of quite a few cybersecurity scares just over the years, right? When you start to
Oh,
look at accounts breached and hackings, etc., and
yeah.
things either being just posted in social media, thinking I didn't post that picture, and so all sorts of these situations that happen. So from
Yes.
that individual standpoint, it's also very important to
Yes.
help people know what to recognize, to trust their intuition, which we're going to get into. But
Yes.
before we go there, since AI is just it's evolving so much, and now we have the AI component in cybersecurity on both sides.
Yeah.
I want to start with a question in terms of
Yeah.
what happens when AI is wrong and no one feels allowed to really question it.
So that's a great question. And I know you and I have talked about culture before and the importance of having a culture where people feel that they're empowered to be able to speak up, to say something. And the problem is you get this bias where people feel like they can't, well, I can't question that. The AI said this, and who am I? Who am I to say this? The problem is you have to be able to call it out. And if you have a culture where everyone just blindly does exactly what the model's telling them, you're going to have a problem because AI isn't accountable. Like really, if you think about it from that context, so where does that responsibility lie? And so you can't have a culture where someone can't say that. And I mean, this has come up in a number of instances. I was talking to a CISO a couple of months ago about, an AI. It was a program to detect AI deepfakes, right? So somebody's applying, it was using an HR process. Somebody was applying on a role, and the they were told, they got the little, oh no, this is a real person. And it was the people on the team who said, you know what, something doesn't quite feel right. And I love that. To me, that screams positive culture. That's a culture where people can put up their hand and say, I don't know that that's going to be the best thing. And they did. And it was borne out that they were correct, that it was a deep fake. And so you need to be able to have that. It's not infallible, and people need to be able to feel like they can raise their hand without being made to look foolish.
Absolutely. And that's a really good example. And there was a conference I attended where it was that same topic in terms of the culture, how you can empower people to trust their intuition. Because
Yeah.
if you do feel something's right, that's definitely a very key aspect, right? That you
Yeah.
can mobilize within the organization. And there was an example that this gentleman gave with the security team, with the cybersecurity team, that they did
Yeah.
a test. They sent out a bunch of phishing emails, and they did that intentionally as a test. And the response that they had was in the vein of, you failed this test because you didn't realize that this was a phishing email. And it was a very different way of going about
Yeah.
that on teaching the workforce. And certainly in that environment, that can bring up a lot of feelings, right? And that's a very different way of going training people. So
Yeah.
on that way, what do you think are some of the additional, habits, ways of really bringing this into the workforce and just furthering that culture and empowering people? Because we are going into the, I would say, point now in civilization where we're I don't want to say, critical thinking might be a little more challenging because
Yes.
there's so many applications that we use, right? And on the social front, that
Yeah.
taking the time to stop and pause and think about something
Yes.
can become a little more challenging. So how do you really
Yeah.
look at bringing that habit in and training people and that culture in the right way in an organization?
Yeah, 100%. So, I mean, you sort of touched on something which I'm very passionate about, which is the human firewall. And I think this is where it's so key. And what it is unfortunately, previously, people think of the humans as the failure point. This is the failure point, this is the vulnerability. And you almost need to reframe that thinking to look at people as, what if you think of them as your first line of defense? And really, it is your first, easiest, simplest, most cost effective line of defense. You want to train your people to be part of the solution and not part of the problem. Now, is that infallible? No, and this is why you have layers of security. But really, at its very core, having your humans become part of the defense as opposed to something you have to protect against, is I challenge a lot of organizations to approach it from that manner. And it's funny you say that, because you talk about punitive or blame focused culture. This is always it's so counterproductive. I can tell you, Lorelai, like statistically, it backs it up. When you have a culture where people are afraid to report, your reporting will go down, and any potential cyber attacks or breaches will take that much longer to be discovered, which means it costs more. It's going to be a lot more involved. You may not be able to recover. Like, it's significant, that sort of impact. So it's funny because I was looking at a study recently. There was an article last year, and it was a data security and management firm out of the UK, and they had interviewed 4,500 workers. And and ironically, you think, wow, this is great. 4 out of 5, so 79% of these employees said, "Yep, I'm pretty confident I could spot a malicious attack." So you're thinking, okay, check, that team is doing everything right. What are they doing? But then you delve into it, and of those, of the people that thought they could spot a malicious cyber attack, 17% wouldn't report it, said that they wouldn't report it because they didn't want to be people to think that they were at fault and they were the reason for it. Another 17% said they wouldn't report it because they didn't want to get in trouble. Another 11% said, well, you know what? I would try to fix this problem myself before I would report it. That's a pretty significant number. So you think now people can actually spot phishing, spot a potentially a malicious attack, but they're not reporting because of they're worried about getting in trouble. And that's wrong.
Yeah, and that's a really good, very interesting statistics that came out of that.
Yeah.
And I certainly, whenever I would make an error, I would be on my, this is kind of a personal story.
Yeah.
I'd go on my dad's computer and I would make so many mistakes. And I think, well, I'm going to try and fix this. And it's
Yeah.
kind of the human nature aspect of it. And you get very frustrated because I'd be
Yeah.
messing things up. This was so many years ago, but it's just kind of embedded in us
Yeah.
in some cases to try and fix this and think, well,
Yeah.
I know I'm responsible for this happening. I at least should try to fix this a,
Yeah.
really a little bit first. And that's where we were talking about in the cultural piece too, where there's a
Yes.
difference between reporting once versus reporting
Yeah.
repeatedly, and the compliance versus trust around that. And so, just on that front, on the resources piece, and because we look at cybersecurity has never been more advanced, and
Yeah.
yet breaches are escalating. And so,
Yeah.
what are those additional resources or precautions that can really take place?
Well, I think first of all, if you're going to go back, like let's take a step back and look at your base sort of what are you training? How are you training people? How are you helping them to look for look at their challenges? How are you helping them prepare so that when they come to work, they are good. They are aware, they are focused, they know what the types of things to look for. So one of the things that I've been doing, which I have honestly, it's been so rewarding because people are applying the rules and they're learning to their own environments is that, why are we waiting? Why are organizations waiting till their employees walk through the door? So instead of waiting till your employee gets to work to say, okay, we're going to talk about cybersecurity, and these are all the things I want you to look at, help. It's almost like you're giving them the tools to protect themselves. So if you give your employees the tools to protect themselves at home, protect their elderly parents, protect their children, outline what kind of scams there are, what are the trends, how to protect themselves on a personal level, you're going to have employees that by the time they get to work, they're already thinking cyber first. Your cyber hygiene is solid. You were looking at, okay, I'm gonna focus on this or that, that email that came in. I remember this also happened at home, or something that happens at work, you take it home. It builds a three-dimensional approach to cybersecurity and not a flat, sort of what do you call it, like a checkbox reporting.
For sure. I mean, the application is certainly key. And I think everyone has a story in terms of either their friends and
Yeah.
family, and they think, oh my gosh, something happened. I put my credit card in, it looked exactly like this site, and
Yeah.
etc. So that's definitely happened. And I once had a situation where it was an advertisement on LinkedIn. And I applied for it to be part of this association. There was some type of exclusivity about it. And this is when I was probably 22 years old. I got a call back, and this was actually, it was a con artist
Oh
somehow.
my
And so
God.
I was on the phone with him, I think, for way too long, 30 to 40 minutes. And
Wow.
because they staged it as this is an interview process to be part of
Yeah.
what we do. This is our methodology of connecting to people who want to be members. And the website looked absolutely
Legit.
legit. Yeah. And there was
Yeah. Yeah.
there probably were some red flags, but I was excited. I didn't really
Yeah.
notice at the time. So from that experience, there's a lot of learning. I think to this day, I think I don't know who that was, what they did with my information, but definitely, I think everyone has been exposed
Yeah.
to that. Certainly. And on the again the AI front, just bringing
Yeah.
back to that, how can it be used as an assistant? Is there a safe way to maybe bring that in? Is there a way to use other tools additionally in a safe way without, jeopardizing, giving away too much information? Or
Yeah.
how do we use those tools now in a safe way?
Well, there's so many, and this is the thing. So sometimes I talk to organizations and their position is, well, we're just not going to use it at all. So we're just no one's allowed to use it. But we've blown past that point. We are so far beyond. I'll give you a personal example. So when I was running the cybercrime team, you have to appreciate on investigations because of our disclosure rules in law enforcement as well as rules around timeliness. So we have a Jordan rule, which means from the moment you arrest someone till till the trial is done, you have 18 months. But you also have a disclosure rules, which means an accused has to have all their evidence or anything that's collected in evidence, and there's no holdbacks. Like there is in other countries or other systems. And so you have to give them everything that was part of the investigation gets turned over to the person who's accused. The problem is, if you can imagine in a cyber investigation, this is reams of data. Like if you're thinking, and I'm old school because, I started policing back when everything was still paper, right? And you had to use carbon paper on a typewriter and triplicate. And so in major investigations, you would use banker boxes because that's what we used to use. And the one investigation we had done so this is just for context, had we printed off all the information for that disclosure and put it in banker boxes, it would have been, it would have filled, and this was just one part of that investigation, 720,000 banker boxes. And that was one part, right? So this is the problem is these files are so complex. And so one of the things, because again, there was a lot of uncertainty around what AI was. Do we really need it? So again, because of these disclosure rules, we went through part of our investigation and we needed to submit a disclosure package. Well, I can't even tell you. I don't want to think about how much I spent on overtime. I had to call people in. I had people working, 2 shifts a day for 2 to 3 weeks to get all that done. Now, fast forward a couple of years, being able to utilize to be able to automate some of that, build the workflows, and have all of that information scanned and sort of collated took no time at all, like literally days. And it took 2 or 3 people and they did it. Whereas I had paid out so much money. So when you look at the advantages of being able to use it, it's significant. And really like where you look at it being used in like sort of like mundane, repetitive tasks, it reduces human error. It can free up your human resources to really look at the complex tasks while, the AI or your tools are doing the ones that are repetitive. So there's so many things that can be done. So, but I would say it's all about you have to have your governance. You have to be able to understand what the model is. So it can't be, I guess all this to say is it can't be one extreme to the other. It can't be, no, you can't use it at all. We're not going to use it. We don't need it. To let's just give it free reign and turn over everything and let we'll just see what happens. So there's a happy medium in there is basically it. Because I will add though, there was a client that I was dealing with who was adamant that they weren't going to use AI because they just didn't see that there wasn't going to no one in their organization was going to use it. And again, you talk about risks of people using models and shadow AI. Their employees, so of course I knew that there was no way that they weren't using it. So I went and talked to the employees, and the employees were like, "Oh yeah, well we aren't allowed to use it on our work devices. So when we have a question, and it can, I can look it up. I put it into my personal device. So now you have zero visibility, zero control. So this is what I mean when I say people need to understand it's out there, it's being used in your organization with or without your knowledge, approval, understand nothing. It's being used. So how do you manage that?
So there's a lot in there. And the first piece, you're just demonstrating the scale of
Yeah.
information. I mean, and that if that is one case, that's really puts things into perspective in terms of what you do need on the digital front, and then you also balance risk and other aspects that really come with that. And you brought up shadow AI. That was my next piece I was going to bring in. There's shadow AI, there's shadow IT, right? And this is what we're seeing with organizations where these applications have been IT approved, but people it's very hard to balance control and tolerance and risk, then also, but empowering the workforce and bringing in new technology. So you have, again, that balance between a traditional approach and then versus the technology enabled approach. And there's speed versus safety. And now with the culture of technology and IoT, the culture and the habits are that we have in terms of working our personal lives is very much so in terms of speed and convenience. So on that shadow AI piece, on the shadow IT piece, I guess in terms of what you're seeing with organizations, what are some of the best ways to really balance that, because organizations will lose a degree of visibility and control. So really operationalizing that piece. How are you seeing that best maybe implemented?
Yeah, no, and I mean, shadow AI will continue to be a significant risk. So if you look at it in terms of, you know, um, it's a vulnerability, a significant vulnerability for a lot of organizations. It literally, I believe it was like 35% of breaches in 2024 were a result of shadow AI. So you look at the and I guess I'm going to step it back a second. The people who are using it aren't doing it to be malicious. They're not doing it. They're not using it to, you know, cause harm to a company. They're honestly, most of them are just trying to do their job better. And why do and you have to go back to why do people even use shadow AI? And I don't know, like, if for a lot of people, like this whole shadow AI is just basically so that people understand it. It's just using tools or AI tools or systems inside your organization without approval. But that also comes without visibility, without governance. And so when you look at why employees, so let's talk for a second about why employees use it. So some organizations are like, okay, we're not going to use it, or we're this is a study. And I get it, you have to have your governance and everything in place. The problem is it's moving so rapidly that if you keep waiting for perfect, you're never going to get there, truthfully. And so if you wait too long, you're going to be so far behind that even by the time you think it's perfect, it's now already outdated. So the problem is you have to move rapidly in the safest manner that you can. But some organizations do give AI tools, but some of the IT offerings aren't always sufficient. The tools may be outdated, they may be clunky, they may be slower. And I'm not saying that some are better than others, but there is definitely a preference, amongst employees, which one's going to give me sort of the best the best feedback of what I need to the information that I need to find. And so employees will find a workaround. Like that's a given. So people need to understand that their employees will find a workaround. So how do you help prevent that? So doing things like engaging with people, understanding what people need, offering training on how to use it safely, offering ways, helping people be better at their roles, but in a way that's sanctioned. And really, I hate to say, having them feel comfortable, and we go back to that culture piece again, comfortable to come in and say, okay, I think something happened, or I think I was breached, or I think I inadvertently did something. Because, I get that ignorance isn't an excuse, but some people may not even be aware that they're not using something that's, approved or not approved. They may not even be aware of it.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point, and you can definitely get lost in all this, right? That's why you do
Yeah.
need someone to guide you. Data governance and in the mining industry, right? We have these conversations on.
Yeah.
It's a very heavily regulated industry, so bringing
Yeah.
AI in is a whole other topic, and balancing having AI being experimented, but within the confines, which is IT approved with privacy, and
Yes.
it's in a safe way. So
Yeah.
on that note. Who would get to override AI? So, in a case where you look at, and there's a few different angles to explore
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
So when you look at who gets to override it, I think you need to really look at it's going to depend on what the risk is. So what is the data? Are you looking at something that's sort of a very low risk? Is it just maybe like we were talking about automating? Are you automating things like scheduling or internal workflows? Then the person who can override or the individuals or the group, because it's not going to be one person. The group or the entity that will be responsible for it is going to be downloaded to whomever it is based on the level of the risk, right? So what is the information? What is the data that is there? But if you're looking at something, for example, like in the financial sector, you look at policing, you look at national security, you look at critical infrastructure. When you look at those, that is going to be a much higher level. And when you look at AI in and of itself, you got to think when you look at who gets to override it. I guess the easiest way that I find people really understand it is understanding what AI cannot be or cannot do. So, AI cannot hold legal liability. Can it exercise moral judgment? Does it understand, societal context? Can it be sanctioned? Can it be fined, fired, jailed? No, there's always going to be a person in the organization, someone who holds that level of accountability. And you need to have people understand what that looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's definitely a new age when it comes to
Totally.
cybersecurity and even people leaning on each other when it comes to that. I mean, having
Yeah.
committees can be very helpful just as a very small
Yeah.
aspect of moving towards it a bit more. And the one piece that I found really interesting talking to you in previous conversations was the collaboration piece, because you look at right threat actors and they collaborate
Yes.
well, and there aren't any rules. So
Yeah.
maybe looking at it through that lens of how can we collaborate better, but there's jurisdictions, multi-jurisdictions, different
Yeah.
countries. There's so many layers to peel back there. But maybe just explain the difference between threat actors collaborating and then other countries or even organizations within a country collaborating.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So when you look at the way threat actors collaborate, and I personally I love collaboration, but it has to be genuine. But I will say they do it better than we do. Because so yes, okay, it's not because they have they have reams of money, they don't have to worry about it. They don't have to worry about, policy or compliance or regulators. They don't have to worry about any of that. They don't have to worry about what they can and cannot do. There's no rules. They also have they don't care. So threat actor groups, and you see it when you see one threat actor group sort of disband. Sometimes after law enforcement action, they will disband, but then they'll spring back up and they'll be something else. And they are almost like an amalgamation. The other way that they collaborate really well is if you have one threat group or, threat actors who are working, who are very good at one particular, like they have a niche, they have a specialty that's really good. They have no hesitation. Hey, we're going to work together and this is what we're going to do. And so what you're seeing is the emergence of groups of like sometimes two or three different groups coming together in a way that best benefits them collectively. And so it's so hard for us because we have to deal with things like jurisdiction. So I think when you think of it like from a policing perspective, every country has different rules and different regulations. Like I talked about, our disclosure rules are very stringent. And that's great. And I'm pleased that they are as strict as they are. But not all countries have the same disclosure rules or, understanding where that information comes from. So every every country has to work within the constraints of their own systems. But threat actors know that. So, for example, if you have an investigation and you're running an investigation, somebody else is running an investigation that's from another country, you generally will all have a common goal because you see it all the time. Europol, the JCAT, they do multiple investigations. You might have 7, 8, 9 countries involved. Every organization, or sorry, every entity within that country, whatever police agency is the lead, they will have their own investigation. They all share, but everyone has to be so mindful of that. And so again, that takes time. So if I want to get information from the UK or I want to get information from the US, there's certain hurdles you have to jump, there's rules, it takes time, and there's always rules around it. There's always caveats, there's always, sort of your parameters. They don't have any of that. They just, hey, you know what? You do that really good. I don't care if you're in another country. Let's just do this. And they could do in minutes what might take us months or a year to collaborate on. And so that gets really frustrating. And they know that. They know that when you cross jurisdictions, it makes policing's jobs harder.
Yeah, there's a lot that we could really delve into on that piece and what
Yeah.
has a successful collaboration looked like between countries that are doing a joint investigation versus not. And you gave an example before, and this is very insightful in terms of the very industry focused threat actors. They would go from
Yeah.
industry to industry. Could you explain that a little bit? Because there's been real examples of that from retail to energy.
Yes.
That was a really good, I think, scenario to explore and understand a bit more.
Yeah. So when you look at, so there's one threat group in particular, and they're called Scattered Spider, or they as a group. So Scattered Spider, in and of themselves, they're a group of young, generally young men, sometimes young women that, I hate to say that it's almost like they want to one up as well, one-upmanship to each other for bragging rights. They're terrible to each other, but they will work together in so much as they will focus on a sector. So not this past summer, but the summer before, they hit retail really hard. They hit In the UK, especially, they hit Marks and Spencer, they hit Co-op, they hit a number of them. And, obviously, Marks and Spencer stands out as so many things that should have been done maybe a little bit differently. And it's not even so much as armchair quarterback, but even when you look at things like, the transparency around the messaging and everything. So that's a whole other conversation. But when you look at the way that group operates, that summer they moved very quickly, and they moved very quickly from um, retail. And so what they do is they almost like understand everything about that sector, where the vulnerabilities are, what they're doing. But what's really key about Scattered Spider is they use good old-fashioned social engineering. They are native English speakers, so that makes it a lot easier. So they're, like I said, primarily young men and women, mostly in the US and UK, I would say for the most part. But they're native English speakers. So because of that, when they call in for help desk, they do it very, very well. They have social engineering down to a T. And so they know where the vulnerabilities are in that sector, and then they hit. After retail, they moved over to, I believe it was insurance and then airlines, or it might have been the other way. But either way, they ran through from retail, and then they hit airlines, and then multiple airlines got hit. And then they hit insurance, and multiple insurance agencies got hit. So again, it just goes to show you that's how they operate, and we need to be able to operate. So I love when people say, okay, we have a really amazing group that works in financial sector. We have a really amazing group that works in mining. I think that's great. You actually need that, but you also need the cross-sector focus, because when you don't know what from another sector may be very relevant to you. And I think that's key.
Yeah, no, that's a very detailed overview, and there's again a lot to really delve into that. But just the amount, it's interesting, and I'm sure someone or many people are working on this now, but if you can collect data on those attacks properly in the right way, where you
Yeah.
can have, AI detect those patterns and really build up a lot of understanding of what that
Yeah.
looks like, tactics. But there's so many layers of, because people making phone calls, like there's different avenues of how they get information. That seems just one of the tricky elements around that, but seems like such a great application for
Yeah.
hopefully AI in the future. The thing that certain types of AI it doesn't do is look at those new realities. You look at NLPs and chat. It doesn't really go there. So that's maybe where there's a great opportunity, and hopefully there can be that extra layer of security, looking at previous patterns, right? Having the right data sets, and
Yeah.
to say, actually, these are the top five areas where there could be the most risk. But there's
Right.
there's so much within that, and this is, as a non-cybersecurity expert, I'm sure there's many facets of that already happening. But
You should see.
yeah, yeah,
It's fascinating, and I love it, because even when you look at something like, threat actors they're able to scan, like people can, and threat actors are using malicious AI to scan and basically to find and exploit vulnerabilities, for example. But they're doing it and they're doing it across an entire sector, and they're doing it at the rate of like 36,000 times a second. Like, it's crazy. But what's the silver lining is we have defenders that can do the same thing. So, like, I will say, I'm hopeful that some of our partners, because with Optiv, obviously, we have a number of partners, and some of them are doing some incredible things using AI on to defend. And this is really our only hope, because otherwise, literally, it's like bringing I hate to say that old adage of bringing a knife to a gunfight, because threat actors are moving so quickly. But I am hopeful that, again, with some of the tools and some of the projects and the innovation our partners have, it's incredible some of the work that's being done in that space. It's mind-boggling.
yeah. No, I'm sure there is. I'm thinking, because in terms of coming together, let's say the collective good, right?
Yeah.
There's more
Yeah.
work that can be done there in the spirit of
Yeah.
collaboration in that way. So, but it's just
Absolutely.
very fascinating at a very pivotal point in time.
Yeah.
But I'm sure if I were to really do that much more research on what is happening, with AI being deployed against threat actors, you could just see the high degree and high amount of
Yeah.
work that's being done there. Yeah. Yeah.
It's the only thing to keep in mind is, from a policing perspective, no police agency, within Canada anyway, are allowed to do anything like that. You can't work offensively. So everything we do is, sort of identify, attribute, and then bring the perpetrators to justice. But yeah, I'm hoping there our other defenders are focusing on turning the tables.
Fascinating. I wanted to
Yeah.
touch base on the IoT space that we are getting
Yes.
into a little bit
Yeah.
because now we have people. I'm using cars as an example where you can open your car and have your phone as the key essentially, and that's just
Yes.
one extra aspect of you being connected to, something in your life, your assets,
Yeah.
your appliances, right? So
Yeah.
so there's it is interesting because there's trust being built. There's trust being built with the applications that we have on the IoT front, how we're interacting with, again, just using vehicles as an example. So
Yeah.
from that perspective, what are, again, the more that we get technologically advanced, the higher the risks. So in that case, how do you balance the risks from that perspective? And what would maybe be too much where you don't want to overextend yourself
Yeah.
in those areas?
No, and really, when you look at like really, do you need a Wi-Fi enabled toothbrush? Like, I do have to say, like at some point, it's almost like you have to just I personally I am not a fan of I don't have smart appliances in my home. I have a good old school gas range and I'm happy with that. And the I remember when we just bought it recently and the salesperson was like, but you could get one that has Wi-Fi and it tells you. I'm like, no, I do not want Wi-Fi. I do not want a Wi-Fi enabled stove in my house. Same thing with our, the vacuums, everything. There comes a point where if you think of how people operate, and I'd love to say everyone I know uses different passwords for everything, but some people don't. And this is where the challenge is. And people have gotten better, I will say, but there are still people that are, well, I know how I can make it really simple. And I'm not just saying it's not just elderly, unfortunately. It's a lot of people still do. Well, I'll just have, some and you just repeat passwords. Well, threat actors, when they're, when you sign up, when you log in, you're using an email, if you're using the same password, the likelihood is they're going to test it against everything else that's in your name. And so there is a chance that it works. And that happens a lot more often than you would imagine. And so what does that look like? Why are you introducing more vulnerabilities? Now, is it avoidable? No. Unfortunately, that ship has sailed. It's not avoidable, but how do you take steps? Like, so for example, if I travel and I rent a car, I don't ever connect my phone to the rental car. In policing, we would never, if you were out doing surveillance or you were somewhere in a work car, you never connected your car it's not your own car. And even if you disconnect it, those are things that are ingrained in me. So, is it hard to travel and have, the phone sitting on the dash? Yeah, but I am not plugging my phone into a vehicle that's not mine. And do you know what I mean? Like it's a small thing, but again, it's that level of I don't want to say wariness, but I mean I trust no one. Lorelai, that's the truth of it. I trust no one. It's an awful thing, it's an awful way to be, but just trying to understand and navigate in this space, at some point you do need to go back and go old school.
Yeah, and I think so just that alone, so I can personally say I don't know how many vehicles I've connected my phone to over the years, but that's a great
Right.
insight to have now.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
also, that's where the advantage, you're still not mitigating the risk by, let's say, having two phones. But if you have one phone where it is, you know, if you have two phones and you have that where you can use it in that way,
Yeah.
that is a way
Yeah.
to maybe do it, but you're still exposing your personal
Yeah.
information, right? That's maybe a slightly way of controlling that a little bit more. But
Yeah.
these are good strategies and things to be aware of to have. That's a good example. I rented so many cars. So it's
Oh,
it's
so good.
and that's just from the individual
Yeah.
aspect as well, right? And
Yeah.
protecting yourself. And the password side of things, just changing your password every 3 months, is that
Well, and the thing is, some people say to do that, and it changes all the time. Do you really need to change it that often? I think again, the rule is for me, it's always I do not have the same password for anything at all. But I'm also so wary that I have my passwords, I have my own system. My passwords aren't on my phone. That's not my system. My system is so, again, you go back to old school. But I have it done in a way that I feel secure that if I needed one of my passwords or access and I was traveling, I would have to phone my husband or one of my children to be able to access it because I wouldn't be able to get it. It's not anywhere recorded digitally. But I'm also wary of password managers. Now, I'm not saying they're not to use them. Some people use them and some of them are really great. But if I was a threat actor, why would I be trying to get into just your bank? I'd be going after your password manager and getting everything. Or why would I be trying to get into your low key one? You know what I mean? Like you're going to try to get maximum bang for your buck. And so we have seen an uptick in attacks on password managers. So what does that look like? How do you protect yourself?
Yeah, and it's tricky because I definitely have a password sheet,
Yeah.
and that's a great way to
Yeah.
manage that and keep up
Yeah.
with it. So I guess how would that look like then? Let's say if you did not have your passwords on your phone, you kept that safely at home, but with password managers, how do you do it? I guess in terms of
How do I do it?
yeah, what's the best way that you can work in that
In
way?
that.
So I have mine in written down, but they're all written in code. Only I know the code. So even when my family, if I have to phone them and they have to tell me what the password is, I'm the only one that knows the code to
Mm.
unlock it. So it sounds so crazy, and people are like, "Oh my God, Lena's so paranoid." But I am so paranoid. Like I have seen I guess having worked in policing for so long, you see it and you see how horrible it is and the impact on victims when they lose everything. Um, and even just trying to explain to my parents, and they're so trusting, and they come from that generation where I'll get a call from my mom and she's like, "Oh my God, Lee, but it was my bank." I'm like, "Mom, it's not your bank." But it said it was my bank. I'm like, "Mom, it's called spoofing," and trying to explain it. And my parents have gotten so I've managed to make them paranoid, which is great. I mean, I think that's a win, but they've also become a lot more aware. And I love it because they tell their friends and now my mom, in her, seniors groups, she brings that up. I've gone and talked to them to present because that's important to me because, that whole generation is so trusting and they're very vulnerable and they get victimized repeatedly. And so it's a anything I can do where if I think even, few of them just went home and changed their password after that one presentation I did, to me, that's a win. Because I know they did. Because some of them, when I started saying, don't use your any significant dates, like your dates of birth or anniversaries, or the names of your children, or the names of your pets, and you could see this room of like 100 seniors, and they're all like, "Oh no!" And I was like, "Okay, no, you need to go home and fix this." So this is using symbols, using mixing it up, like don't use random, like just anything, but just not what you were using, like anything to help.
And that makes an impact, right? Just something that people can apply, they
Yeah.
can do their homework. And I feel better personally when I've done that and I've done an extra security
Yeah.
check on things. You do feel
Yes.
better because you
Yes.
just have that understanding. And if you need to change, something in a different capacity, you understand
Yeah.
what not to do again. So it certainly helps.
Yeah.
And just on the piece of resources that people can use today that are available to the public, what are maybe some of the best ways for people to become more aware? Are there associations or what
Mm.
can they really access to read or tune into
Yeah.
something? Yeah, what are some resources that could help?
I would say one of the best ones they could probably read and get a ton of information. There's two. One of them would be the Anti-Fraud Center, the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center. They have a website. You can report there as well, but they have information about trends that are upcoming. They work closely with the banks. So they're constantly trying to put out information. The other one is the Canadian Cybersecurity, the Triple CS, Canadian Cybersecurity Center. And so they put out, and they also cover the corporate side. So you have businesses and entities that they work with, critical infrastructure, financial, federal government. Basically, they help in that regard. But I would say definitely on a personal level, the Anti-Fraud Center is probably one of your best ones to just go and get information and understand how to protect yourself.
Amazing. That definitely helps in terms of pointing people to the right resources. And just a few more closing questions for you
Yeah.
to really help listeners is that what's one habit people can change today?
Ooh, I would say if something looks like you're about to, like, you get an email, you get a phone call, you get a text, just pause. And that sounds so basic, but it's honestly so. And you look at things like Christmas time, right? We were all so busy, everyone's rushing around over the holidays, everyone's doing stuff, and you're getting an email. And literally, I got one where I was like about to click, and I was like, oh, pause. And you pause for a second. I was like, that looks like it's from my credit card company, but something doesn't feel right. And I paused, and then I left it open, and then I went to my other phone because I still do have two phones. Went to my other phone, I Googled it, and it was fake. It was not
Mm,
legitimate. So pause, because what happens is they get you. You have to appreciate when they operate, they're operating on several principles. One of them is they're trying to get you to react quickly. So it has that sort of sense of urgency that most of these will have. Or you'll get the one that where you feel like, oh, something bad's going to happen. Like, you didn't pay a 407 bill, or you went through a speed camera and now your license is going to get taken away. So it's all about to get that emotional, that sort of visceral response. So anything that comes in that gives you that immediate visceral response where you feel like you have to react right away, that's probably when it's most important to pause.
that's a great takeaway. And I've received some emails where I'm thinking, okay, there's that threat in there that something bad's going to
Yeah.
happen, and then I read it
Yeah.
and I think there's one or two things you can catch, and even
Yeah.
even emails with symbols, like very like to duplicate the domain. So people are doing
Yeah.
sometimes pay attention. It could be a number one instead of an L,
Yeah.
and things like
Little
that.
things.
Yeah,
Little
little things, little things. But they are working on that. So when you look at what threat actors are doing, some of the phishing emails have become so good that like experts get stymied by them. Like it's become that good. So yes, absolutely, but also understand that even if it looks perfect, if it doesn't feel right, or if it's out of character, is it, well, this person never calls me or this never happens, is it out of character? And I think that's the other way to look at it.
Yeah, so is that maybe one question people should ask? Like if you could wrap it up to what's the one question to keep in
Yeah.
mind before you do something, what would that
Yeah.
be?
Is this normal? Has this happened before? And because sometimes it hasn't. Like, yes, I've gotten a speed camera one or a 407 bill that you didn't pay, or a call from your bank and your bank's never called you before because your bank isn't going to call you. They tell you that. And if you go into most banks, they actually have signs in there that say, we will not call you. We will not ask for this information. So ask yourself, has this happened before? No. Okay. So then pause, take a moment, assess it, research it. You aren't no one's going to die if you don't answer right away. But I think the problem is they make you feel like that, right? So it makes you react, and that's where that's where they get you, unfortunately.
It's true. It's true. No, that's all
Yeah,
really helpful. And I think to wrap that up, the last thing I would ask you is that what's the one signal people should never ignore? Or
what
in,
your gut,
yeah,
yeah,
in
what your
terms of
gut tells you.
intuition. Mhm.
Yeah, literally. Because honestly, like I call that my Neanderthal brain, but it's, sometimes that little tickle at the back of your neck or that weird feeling in your stomach or something just isn't sitting well. Don't ignore that because that's your instincts and that's your subconscious picking up on something that your conscious brain hasn't yet. Again, after 30 years of policing, I trust my instincts because they have saved my life more times than I care to think about. And so when I get any of those feelings, I immediately listen to what it's telling me. And so that takes practice. But again, you talk about, to circle back to what you talked about at the beginning, where, someone doesn't feel like they can question what an AI model says. Well, but if it doesn't feel right, then something's wrong.
Absolutely. No, definitely our intuition is there for a reason, and paying
Yeah.
attention to that sometimes can be hard, and just pausing I think is one of the most powerful things that you've really mentioned here. But
Yeah.
thank you so much. This has been
Thank
incredible.
you.
I've certainly learned a lot. There's some things I want to urgently attend to after the call. So I really appreciate you helping just to further understanding and what things look like and some very, very practical insights, habits, new ways of thinking that can be applied
Yeah.
to all people. So
Yeah.
can't thank you enough, Lena. It has been such a pleasure. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks so much, Laurel. It was a pleasure getting to chance to spend time with you. Thank you.